I love playing and invading low levels. The early game is where Souls titles have their most charming play, as infinite options lead to creative limits, something Elden Ring especially lacks as it ascends into anime madness throughout the mid and late game. I could spend a lifetime in the Undead Burg, the Forest of Fallen Giants, the High Wall of Lothric, or the sprawling fields of Limgrave, and if Night Rain is any indication of our foreseeable future, I just might have to. What I'm saying is, first impressions matter. Where you start will shape where you end, what journey you undergo. It's important you're introduced to a game in a memorable and engaging fashion. What that means, however, will vary from person to person. For some, like myself, it means getting absolutely annihilated by an invader, realizing I have no idea what I'm doing and have a lot to learn. For others, it means getting a friend or two to carry them between objectives, never subjecting themselves to the tedium and friction of learning. Neither of these avenues, nor any in between, are objectively right or wrong. Whatever works for a player is for them to decide, and the only shame they should feel must come from within. And instead of passing judgment, I'd actually like to discuss something that has rattled around in my brain, louder and louder as I patrol Limgrave with vile intent. Should invasions have a lower level limit? What do I mean by that? Well, in Bloodborne, you couldn't be invaded under normal circumstances unless you were at least level 30, making cooperating a much gentler experience early on. Compare that to any other Souls title where no such threshold exists, and it makes for an interesting change. A change that had a number of effects on the comparably limited PvP of Bloodborne. Players struggling to navigate Yharnam's blood-soaked streets could pull a helper without the added tension of PvP, letting them enjoy their guided experience to its natural limit. As for invaders, it gave them a much clearer guideline for their invasion targets. There was no reason to make a build below level 43. As with that game's matchmaking formula, that was the lowest level to match with level 34 invasions. Whether or not intentional, this effectively removed twinking from Bloodborne. If you were fighting an invader, you'd have at least some experience under your belt, and it would be most common in the mid to late game. And I imagine a lot of players like that idea. It's well established that among invasion naysayers, a go-to issue is that Twinks are untenable, that they serve no function other than to grief helpless noobs and make all invaders look as bad as possible. Of course, there are counters to that argument. It's understood that overleveled phantoms have a similar impact to the most egregious Twinks, and the myriad of host advantages more than justify invaders powering up as much as possible. And there's at least some validity to pretty much every side of this debate. Twinks can be way too much for an unprepared host to handle, with their plethora of items offering status buildup and damage reduction, along with min-maxing options galore by way of talismans and other stat-altering gear. Just as overleveled phantoms bring all the benefits of the endgame with a pitiful attempt at downscaling acting as the only buffer between them and the decimation of all who would oppose them. Two titans acting as forces of nature on the helpless host who should probably be at the center of the conflict instead of hiding on the sidelines. It's a weird mix that plays into Elden Ring's balance problems and creates a very skewed view of multiplayer interaction. So if both of these extremes could be considered undesirable to a general audience, why does FromSoft allow them? And beyond that, should players want them to remain? FromSoft's design for Elden Ring and Souls games in general has been one of player freedom. If you can figure out a way to do something, more power to you. They put guardrails in for things they foresee as potential issues, but largely they are hands-off when it comes to player choice. Elden Ring has built its entire world around allowing players to go where they please and do as they wish. To say a player has gone somewhere they shouldn't have or obtained something inappropriate for their level is to suggest Elden Ring has a gated progression system that you would need to cheat to bypass, which is ridiculous. There is no requirement for entering Liurnia nor Caelid from Limgrave. There's an open route to both, and even a trap chest that will force you into the latter's depths. While it may be more or less likely for certain items to be obtained early, there's no set path for a player to walk. You go where it makes sense for you, and your journey will vary accordingly. And there you have it. Twinks are allowed and encouraged, and everyone who hates them is a giant baby. Except, that's not exactly right. There's no denying Elden Ring is trying to get you to level up your character and move out of early game ranges. Progressing Roger or Edgar's questlines gives you weapons that have been upgraded to +8, effectively removing you from any early game invasion matchmaking. The items used to invade are also very limited until reaching at least Liurnia and progressing Vare's questline. Killing him early will not yield an infinite bloody finger, so any invader who hasn't progressed at least that far must ration their festering fingers or tactfully reload their save as needed. The act of twinking is one of deliberate calculation. You must understand the system at a fundamental level to do so effectively, and exercise caution when character building. It's not especially difficult, but it is in no way accidental. So as much as I personally enjoy twinking and the weird opportunities it affords, I can't pretend it's explicitly sanctioned by From Software. Allowed, absolutely, but not encouraged. Yet I can't say the same for overleveled phantoms. They are, in no uncertain terms, a default and extremely accessible multiplayer option. Playing within the game's default level restrictions is something people only do at random. If you're playing with a friend, use a password. Unless you're both progressing at the same rate, one of you will undoubtedly be outside the other's natural range, and at that point, you may as well use your strongest character to expedite the process. And it's no mistake that these same benefits are not offered to invaders. Elden Ring is a clear and concise effort to streamline cooperation and relegate invasions to a tertiary role. It's not much of a winner in either category, but the intention feels obvious. In this way, both Twinks and overleveled phantoms have the effect of infantilizing hosts, making them play in the sandbox while the grown-ups talk. And that's where I feel the argument is best made for some form of level gating on PvP, to give the least experienced hosts room to breathe and stand on their own 2 feet. Skill aside, your build is a major deciding factor in PvP. While you can make plenty of competent, powerful options just within Limgrave, giving players a threshold to prepare without needing to understand the rules can go a long way toward improving their experience. And it'd be nice if I had an absolute floor for invasion activity. If there was nothing to be gained below a certain level, I'd just make my characters at that level and go up from there as needed. There's a lot of potential benefit for activity when you establish that sort of standard. It could even lead to a wider invasion range, instead of practically disallowing invading levels below your own and subjecting you to yet another disadvantage. I'd love to be able to invade within the same parameters as I can cooperate, and seamless co-op has shown that approach works well. But setting a level threshold would also make me miss being able to self-govern and try builds at literally any level. Player freedom and choice are central to the design, after all. This idea could extend to multiplayer entirely, and I think there's probably some merit to asking players to put in some solo time before jumping into co-op, but I understand that's not necessarily in line with what the casual audience wants. There's also the fact that delaying multiplayer only further relegates it to the sidelines, something Elden Ring has done enough of. We need more multiplayer engagement, not less. At the same time, I hate the way people blame early game invasions for their negative attitude toward invasions broadly. It's understandable that a rot twink can ruin your session if you're already having a tough time. Piling on rarely begets encouragement. Just as it's understandable to invade doing everything you can to win. Cooperation makes Elden Ring a joke, and you're the thin red line separating a cakewalk from a true Souls experience. And if a level threshold were set, is it more fair than just telling players to not cooperate if they don't want invasions? It's a perfectly reasonable trade-off that hardly seems like it needs more restriction. Then again, That's assuming those players understand what they're trading. I can tell someone this is what they signed up for, but that doesn't mean they speak the language. A little information and some gentle protections don't seem out of place for Elden Ring's casual appeal. As you can probably tell, I am incredibly split on this issue. I want PvP to take on a more integral role in the series, so it feels wrong to suggest any further restriction. I also know that in order for PvP to be more widely embraced, it has to be accommodating to all parties involved, and the build disparity at low level is a major point of friction for tons of new players. It feels wrong to say invasions are fine the way they are and FromSoft should stay the course, because obviously that's just not the case. Invasions can be truly miserable in Elden Ring because Elden Ring is fundamentally broken. It is not built to be balanced or even tolerable. In so many ways, it's little more than a holdover from previous games, poorly adapted to fit a new mold. It needs work before it can function properly, and it's work that isn't being done. The final patch ever eludes us, and there's no realistic chance of From doing anything to seriously change the situation. Seamless co-op gets a lot right, but it can only do so much with a cracked foundation. What we're discussing in this video, in any of my videos, is how these problems can be tackled at their core in future games. I love playing and invading at low levels. It's where I find the game to be its most charming. High-level invasions, and frankly even mid-level more often than not, lean into Elden Ring's power problems in less and less manageable ways. The reality is that the experience is uneven across the whole of the game, and it makes people second-guess their interpretations. Someone will hate being invaded at low level because they feel they don't stand a chance. Then, once they've gained some more potent spam, invaders do little more than chum the waters for their bloodlust. It creates a frustrating imbalance that makes me question what invasion should look like going forward. The only thing that's clear to me is that having everything be completely freeform and without standards guarantees these problems. That doesn't make the approach bad or irredeemable, but it makes it a lot harder to engage with seriously. So let me leave you with some closing thoughts. Invading by any metric is cool and you should try it. It's generally more manageable at lower levels because of the lower damage and lesser spam effectiveness, and when you get into the rhythm, it's top-tier fun. If you're worried about ruining someone else's time, remember it's just a game and invading is a core aspect of the multiplayer. It's every bit as much your experience as it is theirs, and you don't owe each other anything other than your sincere efforts. Flavor it however you'd like, it's all good. And cooperation, especially with your friends, can be a great way to experience these games if that's how you like to play. If your friend doesn't want to make a new character to run through the game with you, that's fine too. Just remember that you get out what you put in, and the best things these games offer will be found through tenacity and perseverance. Being carried across the finish line isn't the same as running the race. That said, if you're not into running, I won't judge you for it. The important thing is you're having fun. And when you cooperate, you are going to get invaded. Expect it, accept it. It's not optional, it's not unnecessary. It's an essential risk to maintain the integrity of the game. It's not consistent, and it will frequently be bullshit, but that's part of its charm. Cooperation breaks the AI in ways you can't imagine, and invaders are the fix. So no matter which side of this conflict you frequent, we are all players of the same game. Would a minimum level threshold for invasions solve the initial friction and maybe change some bad attitudes toward invaders? Quite possibly. At the very least, it might give players time to get comfortable while still cooperating, but without a better consistency to the overall experience, it can only go so far. My point is, I want people to enjoy invasions, and I want invasions to be enjoyable. It's a fantastic concept with so-so implementation in a series so unique I literally can't go anywhere else. I believe it's worth having these discussions, too, about what the best version of these games looks like. With Night Rain on the horizon and experimenting in every direction other than PvP, it seems only fair that we ask ourselves what we really want from invasions in the future, assuming we get them again. Especially since it's gaps like this in the system that can lead creative people to make their own versions of games. I am dying for someone to come in and fill the PvP void left by Elden Ring and Night Rain. While I'm not a game developer myself, the best I can do is contribute my thoughts to the discussion and encourage you to do the same. So let me know if you think invasions should have a lower level threshold in the comments. If you want to see more of my methods for making low-level invasions less polarizing, maybe check out one of my other videos featuring more of my Limgrave-only invaders. Like the video if you liked it and subscribe for more. It really does a lot to keep myself and this channel going. And until next time, thank you for watching.